I want to talk about, say it with me, March Madness. Over
Much better. Oh.
130 there you go. Damn, I should have waited for the cue. Well, over 130 combined men's and women's squads will tip off in the hunt for college basketball glory. It's a national championship. Now, it begins March 18th after Selection Sunday, where all the teams find out where they're playing, what regions, who they're playing. And then it runs until the championship games. Get this, all the way on April 6th for the women in Florida and April 7th for the men. That will be in San Antonio, Texas, which is called the Final Four, which, of course, you have the Elite Eight, the Sweet 16. It all goes on. But it goes without saying that there are a lot of teams and players to wrap your head around. And that's why I've employed the help of a journalist whose job it is to know his team and dozens of others throughout the year. He is the broadcast voice of the 23rd ranked Brigham Young University basketball squad, a job he has held since 1997. He also calls football, American football, baseball, and women's football, soccer for the BYU Cougars. Greg Wrubell took some time from his prep from another game to try and help our audience to understand the magnitude of March Madness. For people that aren't familiar with March Madness, my colleagues are not big March Madness people. Explain why it's such a big deal and what it is that draws the staggering numbers that they get.
March Madness is a billion-dollar enterprise in America, and it's a tournament that's been around for a long time, 85 years. It only really became March Madness late 70s, early 80s began to really grow, and the field has expanded over time to where now it's 68 teams, and with an NCAA tournament or an NCAA field that encompasses more than 350 teams, it's a pretty exclusive group to get into that top 68 and make it into the tournament. So it's the pursuit of every college basketball team, and if you can make it into the dance, you've really done something. And fortunately, it looks like BYU will be playing in the NCAA tournament for a 32nd time this year, and we are heading down the stretch run.
As you look at the bracket, what do you think about the tournament this year? It seems like in years past, Greg, there's been one or two dominant teams that have just been, clearly number one seeds. They're the odds-on favorites. You've had UConn in the past. You've got the Blue Bloods, obviously, with teams like Kentucky, Gonzaga, UCLA. It's a little different this year. I feel like you could make a case for maybe 7 to 8, 10, even 12 teams that have a legitimate shot at winning the title.
I feel like this year, Todd, there's a couple of teams that have kind of separated themselves in Duke and Auburn right now, and then Tennessee and Houston are seen as the other two number one seeds, and of course in the tournament bracket there's four brackets of 16 teams plus four that play-in games, and so of those top four number one seeds, I think Duke and Auburn have kind of separated themselves right now. They'd have to be considered prohibitive favorites, I think, to meet in the championship game. But then I think there is a great deal of dispute over who might occupy those 3 to 8 spots in terms of the next 6 best seeds on those top 2 seed lines. But certainly the way Duke's playing basketball right now is pretty phenomenal. They're blowing everybody out and look very much worthy of a number one seed.
Let me ask you this, and I ask you this question primarily because you do also American football for BYU, who had a great season this year. Has NIL just been just a seismic shift in college sports for the people that are watching around the world and listening that just are amazed by college kids now? They're not professionals, they're college kids, and they're getting paid sometimes better than the professionals. Has NIL just changed the game completely from your perspective on sports across the board?
Well, it does feel very different, Todd, and I'm not the old man shaking his fist at the clouds here, but I do feel like I've kind of I've lived through the golden age, if you will, of college sports, and I'm now watching the transition into the professional aspect of this enterprise. And it's interesting because in one respect, it's kind of disheartening to see how maybe the old college spirit and all the things you kind of loved about amateurism are kind of flaking away. But by the same token, it helps a school like BYU, which has a lot of people willing to contribute and help with a lot of resources that they never really could before because of restrictions. There were very much a hands-off policy with collegiate athletes in the past, and now that there are many more ways to provide compensation and incentivization, BYU, among many schools, has an enhanced ability now to lean on those resources to help attract and retain some of the best talent, player, and coaching talent in the country.
Exciting times for you ahead with BYU, indeed. Greg, getting back to March Madness and what it means, I've been asked by people obviously around the world, and they say, well, why is this so encompassing? And you've touched on that a little bit. It's really almost like a national holiday. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like basketball palooza. For the basketball fans, you're going to get basketball from morning till night. And if you're on the West Coast, it's going to start as early as 10 a.m. and it's going to go till midnight. And it's going to be 3 weeks. And it's going to be the all encompassing front page of everything. Even, I don't say the NFL's taking a back seat to it, but the NFL strategically doesn't put anything up against March Madness. And the numbers, and I try to explain this to people in Europe, the numbers that are just staggering with productivity that goes down, the brackets, the bracket busters, all the names like Cinderella Stories and Sweet 16 and Elite 8, all these things that come with it. It's its own cottage industry.
These 3 weeks to which you referenced are some of the best weeks in the American sporting calendar. And that first weekend of games, when all 68 teams are in action, it is truly like a national 4-day holiday. Games morning till night. There's an enterprise in the States that has gained in popularity over the years, where the populace fill out their brackets. Right, they get the bracket, and even people who aren't fans of the sport find themselves in their office filling out the bracket with the rest of their colleagues. So March Madness brackets are hugely popular. There's probably a financial component to it as well, relative to wagering and things like that has to be considered. But for the most part, this is when people become, even if they were just casual or not fans of the game, become hyper fans of the game for a matter of weeks. And the specter of a Cinderella team is always there, Todd. We use the phrase Cinderella story to find that team or teams that nobody saw coming that can win a game or two or three or four and put themselves in rarefied air. There's really nothing like it. I guess you could argue it would be as if in one of the smaller teams, the minnows in the FA Cup, ends up playing at some of the biggest or best stadiums and upsets some of the bigger clubs in the UK, for example. It's like that. The FA Cup encompasses so many teams. The NCAA tournament encompasses so many teams. And that's where somebody that no one saw coming can do some pretty special things.
And as always, remember, you can hear my full chat with Greg Wrubell on This Sporting Planet YouTube channel. So, Natalie, Ed, are you excited for the madness?
I mean, it sounds mad. It really does. Do you know what it always, whenever I hear these sort of events that happen in America when it comes to the college sports, I just feel such envy, because it's just so amazing how wonderful the college system is, that you can promote these sports. The only thing I can liken it here to is the boat race, and that's Oxford against Cambridge. But that's the only kind of rivalry you get when it comes to universities on a big scale. I just think it's fantastic to put some of these players on the map, hopefully for a career in the NBA or the WNBA as well. So I'm so intrigued by it, but I have to hold my hand up and say I hadn't really heard much about it before.
Yeah, me neither, actually. And I was looking at the figures. Is this right, Todd? Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery pay $891 million annually for the broadcast rights for college sports.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. A lot of people here call it basketball palooza, and it's just nonstop wall-to-wall college basketball on the men's and women's side, literally for 2 or 3 weeks. So I've seen stats that say the American productivity at work drops a precipitous amount because people are watching that. And the big thing to do is fill out a bracket. So you get in a pool with your buddies from school or work, you put in $5 or £5 or whatever it is, and you fill out your bracket, how you think it's going to all play down to who's going to win the championship, and then the winner takes home the pot. And it's amazing how the first weekend, they're called bracket busters. So you have, let's say you have Kansas going all the way to win it, and Kansas loses to Southwest Missouri State the first game. And you're like, no, I just lost. So it's a bracket buster. It's kind of an anxiety time. I don't like filling out brackets because it makes me not want to watch it because it just ruins the tournament. But you can get up literally on the West Coast at 10 a.m. and watch basketball till midnight. There's double headers, and then they take an hour or two break so you can get up and get some food and go to the loo, and then it's basketball again. And this goes on for a couple weeks, and you follow the drama, and then you have what's called the Cinderella stories, where a 16-seeded team can knock off a 1 or a 15. So you have these blue blood teams, which you guys have probably heard of, like Duke and UCLA and Kansas and Gonzaga, the teams that are always there. And then you have these little schools that just get a chance. They're from a small conference, and it'd be kind of like the FA Cup, like what we're seeing with Preston. I mean, if Preston knocks off a Man City for the FA Cup, That's a Cinderella story. So that's, I think, the intrigue of it. But Greg does a great job. He's a great voice. Full disclosure, I've known him for years and years and years. And I did my undergraduate studies at Brigham Young University. So go Cougars.
So how do we get these teams into this bracket phase, into the March Madness? How do they qualify?
Excellent question, Miss Sawyer. So what they have is you have the whole season, and so you play your whole season of maybe 25 games, and then you're ranked. And then there's a committee that gets together and they seed them. And so it's called Selection Sunday. And so you'll see teams that are on the bubble. They might be in, they might be out. You don't know if you made the field of 68. And they're just waiting, and they'll have cameras and they'll do big shows where they'll show these teams that are sitting there on pins and needles. Do we get in? Do we get in? Yes, you get in. And you're going to play Duke in the first game. Oh, that's fantastic. We're going to get smoked. But there's always a chance. And so Selection Sunday is a massive ratings getter. I think March Madness really is almost like a national holiday. People just get so involved in it. But it'll be amazing. It'll be interesting. Get your brackets filled out early. I'll help you guys. A lot of people do it by the mascots. Well, it's a tiger versus a blue devil. Surely a tiger will beat a blue devil, and that's how they pick it. And sometimes they do really well. But it's really good. It's a lot of fun, but it's for love, and it doesn't really translate. And this is one point I wanted to make quickly: is it doesn't really translate into the NBA game. So a lot of people think, oh, if my team goes to March Madness, am I going to get a big NBA contract? No. That might be your one shining moment of glory, is your team made a run into the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, and then you were bounced out. But you had that, and you'll have that the rest of your life. So it's a great tournament, but it really does capture the American landscape. For I think the NFL doesn't really even, well, the NFL dominates everything, but the NFL really doesn't get involved or is even on this landscape during March Madness.
Are there scouts at all these games? Are the future NBA stars being picked? I mean, maybe not the whole team, but there must be examples of NBA players who've been scouted in these games and then gone on to make it in the big leagues. And what was I reading as well about NIL? It's name, image, and likeness athletes. Is it something like that?
So years ago, college players were not allowed to be paid. It was just, you got a scholarship, you went and played, and when you got done, if you got drafted in the NBA, great. If not, maybe you went to Europe or you went to somewhere else, Asia, and played basketball. Not quite NBA money, but you got a chance to continue your career. Now, the courts and the law in the U.S. and the NCAA is against it, but they've decided that players should be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. So if, for example, Nike thinks you're fantastic and you can really help their brand, Nike's going to pay you $2 million to wear their shoes and be one of their sponsored athletes. And before that wasn't possible. Now it is. And so what you have is you have a lot of college athletes that are making tremendous money, especially in American football, that they might make more money and they might not get into the NFL. Or if they do, they might get a lesser contract. So you get a lot of guys like, why am I going to leave college? I'm going to stick around and play a few more years. I'm getting paid. I'm going to college. But it has launched some big names. I mean, Steph Curry had a great run with little school Davidson, what really put his name on the map and got him into the draft. Michael Jordan, of course, hit the big shot back in the day, but everyone always knew he was going to be amazing, but wasn't drafted number 1. He was drafted number 3 by the Chicago Bulls. And of course, Anthony Davis had a great run with Kentucky. So you can improve what they call your draft stock, but it's not a guarantee. If your team wins the whole thing, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get in the NBA and get paid.